Hey there friends, how you doing today? I'm Shannon and thank you for joining me for this video. I am in the process of covering a used canvas with white gesso acrylic medium. This canvas I got from another artist locally. They were just looking to get actually a bunch of canvases out of their home. They didn't want them, they didn't need them, so they said take them and use them however you'd like. So about a year and a half ago, I picked up these canvases, cut them off of the wooden bars, and cut them into smaller pieces to use, to reuse for my own work. So some of them are a lot smaller. This one is about 12 by 18. And for this piece, I wanted to work with a wider surface instead of portrait orientation. I usually end up painting portrait, but for this one, I decided to put it landscape orientation, which is wider side to side. I started this piece kind of inspired by the bigger painting that I did at the beginning of the year, which was on a large canvas, a 24 by 36. It was the biggest piece I've done to date. And I kind of looked at it and wanted to play around with trying to figure out how to start a painting, whether it's creating these big areas of color, as you can see, where they'll show through here and there for the final piece, but also layering in some textural marks along the way. This piece, you will see as I go, becomes challenging because I started with kind of a more specific idea, whereas most of the time I try to go very intuitively with my paintings and let it go wherever it's going to go. And sometimes that is based on how I'm feeling for the day. Sometimes it is the music that I'm listening to. And I think my first mistake was trying to not copy the painting that I had done a couple weeks ago, but having a little bit too much of an idea in my head at the beginning. But you know, the whole process of making art and painting is trying different things, trying new things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. And I learned a big lesson in this piece of moving on and not being so afraid to keep going when I was starting to feel stuck in different things. I wasn't feeling stuck quite yet, but you just saw me using my blow dryer to dry the paint a little bit. That's one of my little tricks that I use when I'm using a lot of paint very quickly on a canvas. It stays very wet, so using a blow dryer just kind of helps speed up the process of drying the paint so I can create more layers on top. If you work with too much wet paint, it just starts to blend together and turn to mud. And I knew I wanted this piece to be very distinct whenever I changed color. I didn't want a lot of color mixing to go on. The other thing I did with this piece was switching a little bit back and forth between using palette knives and brushes. I want to get better and more comfortable with using a palette knife, and it's actually a really fun way of playing with applying paint. There are definitely different textures and marks that you can make with palette knives. There are so many different ways that you can use them to blend colors and create marks and texture and scratches. And I used to see palette knives as a big challenge, and now I'm just trying to figure out the ways that I like to use them with my own art. So you can kind of see here that a bit of a landscape is taking shape. I like to describe my art as dreamscapes, where they're not necessarily a specific place in the world, but maybe a place that feels like a dream or a place that you might have been. It has colors and shapes and atmosphere built into it. But it could be anywhere. It could be a place that you've imagined while reading a book, or a place that you've seen in your dreams or in a movie. But it's nowhere specific. And that's kind of how I like to make my paintings. You can interpret it however you like, however you feel, however you connect with it. So I'm starting this piece with my warm tones. I started with that black mark and then layered in the orange and the yellow and the red. And now I'm moving to magenta. And the reason I started with those warm tones is because I thought I ultimately wanted more of the piece to be blues and cooler tones. But I do like having those warm tones mixed in there. And the order that I choose to use my colors gets to be very important towards the middle and the end when I'm deciding what bits and pieces I want to keep showing through and which parts I want to cover up a little bit. It's kind of funny going back and watching this because it was such a long process making this piece. And when I say long process, it was 2 days. Not to be dramatic, but usually when I sit down to start a piece, I can start and finish it in the same day. But this one did challenge me in some different ways, and I did have to go back to it the next day and kind of figure out what I wanted to do. So this is actually going to be the first of 2 videos, I think, on this channel, where you'll see the first day what I made and kind of how I got there, and then the second day how I had to take a step back and really think with a little bit more intention, okay, where is this going now? One of the tricks I learned as a photographer for 12 years, and also just general basic art and design composition, is working with the rule of thirds when you're composing an image. And that is basically if you were to create a grid dividing what you see in front of you into 3 sections across and 3 sections top to bottom, kind of like a tic-tac-toe board. The rule of thirds breaks up a composition in a way that your eye travels across it or down, and it's kind of what your eyes expect. So if you're looking at a photograph of a landscape, you might see the land in the lower third, and then the top 2 thirds are the sky and the clouds. Or if you're looking at a city or any photo or image that is intentionally following the rule of thirds, you can kind of pick out where those divisions are visually. And it doesn't have to be exact, but even generalized, kind of creating these squares that you're working within, or these rectangles or areas. So the first thing I did, making that black mark all the way across the lower third, was really my first intention to create in that way. And when you see the final painting done, you will see those thirds going across. And like I said, not in a straight line, but visually you can see the different pieces in different areas. So I added some drips in with a dark Prussian blue. That's a golden paint. I work with acrylics, and the golden, as you can see there, the little bottles of it. I like getting these smaller bottles because sometimes when I'm trying a new color, I'm not sure if I'm gonna really like using it. So I always get a smaller tube or a smaller bottle first before getting a bigger one. But I do tend to use the same colors in most of my work. And this piece is very colorful when you see where it lands. A lot of my pieces, I tend to use the entire spectrum of colors. And then recently I started working with some more limited palettes as my own personal challenge to simplify and see what I can do when I don't have every color of the rainbow included in my work. But here I'm, moving from the warms to the cools, starting to layer in that blue. And I'm starting to have an idea of what I want this to be. It's a dreamscape. It's a landscape of sorts. The blue is representing a waterway cutting through the land. But it's all dreamy colors and marks that nothing is really representational of anything specific. So there might be some trees, or it might be grass, or it might be this complete mashup of different textures and natural and fantastical elements. I really love using drips in my work. I've mentioned it in a couple other videos before, but I find that creating drips is a really great way for me to let go of control when I am working on a painting, because as much as I love working intuitively and I love going with the flow, I do get into these times where I start overworking an area a lot, or I might just start getting stuck. Is start getting stuck a thing? But I get stuck in these areas, and drips are a really great way for me to surrender and let it be what it's going to be. When I spray a little bit of water on the paint, it's going to go wherever it's going to go, and I can only control how much water I'm spraying and the angle at which I'm spraying. Sometimes I spray it a little bit diagonal or to the side to get it to splatter a little bit. But then when it's dripping down the canvas or the surface that I'm working on, it's going to catch on texture and different areas that might be sticking out or at an angle, and it's going to flow any which way. So I try to use my drips kind of early on in the process, so they're built into the background layers, and they're always present, but I try not to do them too close to the end, or they could completely change the scope of what I'm going for. I don't know, maybe at some point I'll start doing drips at the end just to let it be. So I'm working in some white. I think it's ivory white. I use Winston & Newton acrylics as well as golden, and some Liquitex. And one of the things I decided going forward is to not shy away from adding white back into my work to lighten up and brighten up different areas. A lot of last year was creating all these small, colorful marks all over an entire piece, and now I am using that technique, but trying to mix up the size of the brushes and really think about the composition once it starts to take shape. So I know with this piece what I generally want it to look like. And the point where I get stuck at the end is where I'm really struggling to keep it looking dreamy and loose and whimsical, and not getting so caught up in realistic marks, if that makes sense. Because what I love about creating abstract is that it is open for interpretation. It's open to be seen and connected with in whatever way the viewer chooses. And sometimes I do hit a point where it's starting to cross over into a more realistic composition, and I have to pull it back and figuring out how to pull it back and let go with the colors and the marks. See, here I'm using a fan brush. This is kind of, I think, where it starts. I'm using a fan brush with, I forget what shade of green. It might be sap green or hooker's green. But I'm using this fan brush and making these tall, skinny marks that in my mind are representing trees, forests, growth. And that's where the realism starts to creep in, where I start thinking, oh, which way is the sun going to hit the trees and this watery area? You start overthinking and making decisions that might not be where you originally intended to go. So I work in the front corner of my living room. I live in a condo and I don't have a dedicated official studio space, but I do have this front corner window of my living room where I have a hutch and I have a tabletop easel. I keep an art cart to my left. I am a lefty, so the art cart's between my chair and the window. And that's where I keep all my paints and my mark making tools. And then I keep my brushes and stuff kind of on either side of the tabletop easel. Everything's in a very small, cozy space. And some days I just wish I had a little bit more elbow room. But for now, I am determined to create art in the time and the space that I have. Even if it doesn't feel perfect, that doesn't really exist anyways. I hope if you're watching this and you feel the desire to create or paint or whatever you want to do, you don't need any specific space or materials. Work with what you have at the time. And when you have the ability to do so, you can upgrade, whether it's better paints, better surfaces, a better studio space or office or whatever space you want to create for yourself. I work on this hutch and it has a couple shelves where I put some plants and some colored jars and trinkets and pictures and books that I really love and enjoy having around me while I'm creating. It's a colorful, whimsical, happy little spot. All right, so here's where I start going a little bit back and forth between the warms and the cools, figuring out what I want that dreamy sky space to feel like. When I started, I had thought it would be a lot more blue, and where it lands, I'm going to keep that a surprise, but it feels a lot more successful at the end than it does right now. Right now, it feels a little messy and heavy to me. I wanted it to feel lighter and warmer. So here I think I'm going to grab the blow dryer again, maybe. Nope, not quite yet, but you can see some areas where I've put down a lot of paint and it's really wet, especially that orange that blended with the white right around where I'm working. I try not to mix colors too much on the canvas. I use a lot of my colors straight out of the tube or straight out of the bottle. I know a lot of people like to mix their own colors before or as they work. I mostly pick the colors that I know I want to use because, I don't know, color mixing right now, it's not something that I really feel the desire to do. I think a lot of these colors are just so vibrant and beautiful the way they are. Maybe with time I'll start mixing my own colors, I'm not sure. You can see I'm painting in the afternoon. The sun is on the front side of our house, and we have these slatted, what do you call them? Shades When the sun is bright, the shades cast this shadow across my workspace. It's just kind of a nice, warm place to sit and make art in the afternoon, especially in the winter. I live in Connecticut, and right now when I painted this, it was the end of January. It was very cold out. We were getting some snowstorms and ice storms and frosty days. So anything I can do inside my house to make it feel brighter and warmer than the gray, frosty outdoors this time of year. I think that's why I like to use so much color. I love the spring and summer and fall. I love flowers. I love being outside in nature. I love just standing and looking at sunsets and, these little ways that we can find joy and beauty in the world around us. I like to bring that into my art in the colors and in the textures and marks that I make. Little homages to these little beautiful things that I see and enjoy. I think this is where I just start getting a little, I don't want to say frantic, but not quite sure where this is going. Every mark, every color, I might get this light bulb moment of, yes, this is good. And then the next moment, oh no, what did I just do? But it's fun. You got to have fun with it. If there's one thing I've learned with painting, it is not to take myself too seriously. Yes, there's a time and place to be serious. But when I was in college and taking art classes, a lot of times I felt like an imposter, like I didn't know enough, like I didn't have the right terminology and the right knowledge of art history and techniques. So one of my goals with doing this channel and making these videos is to have a conversation about art and not just talk about painting, but talk about how we enjoy and appreciate art and how we connect with art, and really just normalize the art world for those who might feel like imposters to feel comfortable talking about it. And, I truly believe, and I know it's just, art is for everyone. I think in the art world, sometimes people feel like they need to know so much or understand so much. But if you just walk into a museum or a gallery or are looking at a piece of art and connect with it, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter how or why or where, but simply enjoying art. It's all part of the human experience, and the sooner you learn not to let anyone try to dictate how you enjoy art, the better. It's taken me close to 38 years to learn that. I certainly didn't have the confidence in college to know these things, but with time and learning and experience, I've come to a place where I feel comfortable talking about art in the way that I want to. I'm certainly not going to give any collegiate lectures on art history and, stuff like that, but I'm learning. I'm still learning. I'm still curious. I'm excited to see new things and allow myself to be delighted and surprised and, discovering what I like and discovering what I connect with. And it's always changing, and it's always something new. So here, just getting back to the painting, I started layering on a lot of this warmth, these light yellows, that light, what are we going to call it? that pink that's kind of like clay. So you're really seeing those three sections coming through: the top, the middle, and the bottom. And this is, I think, really where I start thinking that it's going to look more realist than impressionist or abstract. And I keep going back and forth between not knowing which way to go with it. I do actually kind of like where it is here, but I know that there's a lot of change coming, not just in this video, but in the next one. While I was painting this, I had started a book series that I actually just want to take a second to recommend. I started reading a lot more this year. I decided, realizing that being intentional with my time to create art, I could also be intentional with my time to read. I really missed reading for pleasure. I honestly have not spent a lot of my adulthood reading for pleasure. So I said, I do enjoy reading once I get into it. So maybe the way that I practice painting more, I can practice sitting down and spending time with books. So I'm actually currently on the third book of a series, but it's called the Winter Nights series by Katherine Arden. It's 3 books. It takes place in Russia. It's historical fiction mixed with folklore and fantasy. And it's just a really beautiful story. I have a lot of words to describe how it makes me feel, so it's kind of hard to summarize it quickly. But it's a really great series. I highly recommend it. And it definitely inspired the way that I ended up going with this piece, kind of playing around with the boundary between the world we know and things that we can't see that are there. Maybe these realms and times that exist around us. And I just really hope if someone watches this and they read the book, they get what I'm saying. Just kind of towing the line between what we see in front of us and what we're curious about in the world and in the universe that could be there or that we believe to be there. So this video is sped up to, I think, 2 or 3 times faster than I'm actually painting, which is why it looks quicker. I wanted the video to not take too much time out of anyone's day to watch all the way through, but I also didn't want it so fast that you couldn't see some of the smaller marks and pieces that I worked on. So I'm adding some more drips in, trying to break up a little bit of that bottom area, trying to figure out what I'm doing with it. Okay, at this point, I think I switched to, I had taken a break and come back to it probably between picking my daughter up from school and then once we were all home again in the late afternoon. You can see a couple more little changes I probably made off the camera. I will say the top right area of sky where it kind of looks like there's like 5 or 6 suns rising above the clouds. I really loved that, and I'm glad I kept that throughout the entire piece. Even at the end, you can see it. I think it adds to the whole dream world aspect. I just want to take a minute about 3/4 into this video just to ask that if you're enjoying this, if you enjoy my videos, if you're learning anything or sparking some ideas, if you don't mind just hitting the thumbs up button and subscribing, it really helps me to know if anyone's watching and if they like it, if there's certain kinds of content that I make that really get a good response. It just helps me to know, like, this is worth doing. It's worth taking the time to share my experience and share the things that I'm struggling with or the ideas that I'm working through. And if there's anything during the video that you have questions about, it can be about the materials that I use or what a color might be or anything that I've talked about. I love connecting with people, so you can always leave a comment. I'm also very active over on Instagram. You can follow Shannon Sorensen Art at Instagram. I'll put the link down in the description below the video. You can message me anytime. I try to respond to most messages or comments in a timely manner when I'm not chasing the kids around and elbow deep in a painting. So here I'm kind of finding that I like the play of color along the bottom, adding in a little bit more of that creamy, not quite a true white, but I did mix a bit of an off-white. It is a color that I like working with, and I actually ran out of it, the little bottle that I had, so I haven't gotten a new one yet, so I tried to mix my own because it is one of my favorite colors to work with when I need to brighten up some areas and add some warmth. This one came out a little bit grayer though, so I do end up going over it quite a bit in the next video. You can also hit the little bell button if you're watching on YouTube, and that helps notify you when I post future videos so you can know that there are new videos to watch. I'm trying to put these out, if not every week, every other week or so. And I'm working on creating a better setup for recording. It's tough in the tight space to find the right angle where I like to sit and work with my easel at an angle and to get the lighting quite right. So each video you watch will probably look a little bit different, and hopefully I can find the sweet spot of what I'm hoping to create here through this channel, where you can get a really good view of what you're seeing painted in front of you, and also that the light isn't too harsh. It's all a learning process though, so I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. Okay, here is where I think I started getting a little wild with all this green along the middle. I do know that I stopped close to the end of this use of color because I knew it wasn't what I wanted, and I had to give it some time and space to think it over and think it through and decide what to do next. I did really like, though, you'll see this almost lime green, this bright green that I ended up using. It's called green gold. So it's not like a yellow green. It does have like this warmth to it, and it's very bright. I love the color, but it just didn't quite work the way I wanted it to for this piece. So I am going to probably play with that at another time. If you have any suggestions for how you want to watch me paint, I do tend to sit and use this tabletop easel just because when I'm working for a long time, I try to take care of my back and my feet, not be on my feet for too long, but I do have a stand-up easel that I might try using in the near future and see if that works a little bit better. But I just remember being a little kid and sitting down and watching Bob Ross paint, and the ways that he walked you through what he was painting and talked about his process, and also just offering some encouragement. I really hope that if you stumbled upon my channel, maybe if it reminds you of that, if you are inspired to go and try some painting or some creative activity, that's all I really want. I really just want people to know that you don't need the nicest materials, you don't need the fanciest brushes, you don't need a big dedicated studio space. If you want to create, use what you have and get started. Sometimes that's the hardest part, just getting started. I know for me, when I have a big blank canvas in front of me, I have to just start drawing on it, scribbling, doodling, or putting a big swath of color through it, because sometimes it's that big white space that intimidates us and keeps us from moving forward. So if I can give you a little bit of encouragement right now, it's don't let that scare you. Just start. Put something down, put down some paint, put down some pencil, anything to break you out of that feeling of being intimidated. I know for some people, they just put a lot of pressure on themselves at the very beginning. Before they put anything down, they feel pressure to create a masterpiece, to create something important and magnificent. And it really doesn't have to be that. Creating to create is really more of what it's about. And oh gosh, I'm just looking at this right now and I really like where it is. And I know it's not going to look like this when it's done. Oh, that happens sometimes, and that's okay. But the process of creating, how it makes you feel, sometimes it's therapy, sometimes it's meditation, sometimes it's play. And it can be different things to the same person at different times. I've used art in my life to feel better, for comfort, for getting out complicated feelings of grief and anger and sadness. And I have also used it to loosen up and get out of my head and just have some fun. So the important thing is just doing it. Just making something, making anything. And if you're someone who wants to be creative and doesn't quite know where to start, but you want to just do something, I do have on my website some hand-drawn coloring pages that are really fun. It's a digital bundle, so you have to print them on your own. You get a big folder full of files that you can print at home. You can make a bunch of copies, and you can just enjoy coloring. I think coloring is such an enjoyable experience at any age. It's one of the first things we learn how to do as a kid. It's one of the first creative things that we do. And, it can be relaxing, it can be fun, it can be playful, it can be messy. If you like details, if you like just coloring big chunks of color over a page, kind of having a coloring page in front of you takes a lot of the pressure off. And you can just enjoy it. All right, so we're coming down to about the last minute of this painting session. I am going to finish this piece in front of me in a separate video. I sat down the next day to revisit it and do some more. So here you can see I did add some more marks. I think my phone ran out of battery at some point, so I ended up taking a quick video after I had finished up for this day. So you can see those bright green marks. So in the next video, I hope you will tune in at some point and see where this painting ultimately landed. But I wanted to say thank you for joining me today to watch this. Sometimes things don't go the way we plan, but sometimes all you need to do is sleep on it and look at it from a different perspective the next day. So join me for the next video. And thank you so much for watching wherever you are. I hope you have a great day.